So let's continue our lesson on the American colonies. This is lesson 3. Today we're going to learn about slavery in the colonies and compare forced migration and voluntary migration. Slave. A slave is a person who is the legal property of another person. Take a look at this map. This is a map of the transatlantic slave trade map. Do you see all of these areas here in green? This is the volume and direction of the transatlantic slave trade from all African to all American regions. So this shows you where slaves came from out of Africa, how many, and the route they took and where they went in America. So for example, looking here, I can see that over 1.5 million slaves came from here and took this route and either branched off and went this way to northern United States or either to Cuba. So you notice here that it says North America. Slavery existed in North America long before the United States was ever established. So how did slaves get here? Well, they came through what we call the Middle Passage. Two of the images show the interior of a slave ship. You can see that it's pretty cramped, not a lot of room and space for the slaves. On this image, you see that they're chained together. This is how they sat inside of the ship. On the slave deck, you see that there are dozens and dozens of slaves as well. Not a lot of room, definitely not a comfortable trip. Now let's take a look at the triangular trade map. This shows us the items that came from countries to Africa and how they traded. First, I'm going to read something to you. There's a question that was asked, how do relationships begin to get developed between Europeans and Africans? Well, it all goes back to trade. This response was given by Margaret Washington, the Associate Professor of History at Cornell University. Once again, the question, how do relationships begin to get developed between Europeans and Africans? Her response, these relationships are based on, as far as the Europeans are concerned, a desire to trade. First in gold and in textiles, later in human cargo. That means people. For Africans, it's mainly wanting to get extras, not necessities. And it's a trade between the Europeans and African elites. Because Europe is more technologically advanced than Africa, Africans are in a situation where they can get goods that they don't have. They can get guns. They also want a kind of textile that they can get from the Europeans, a more sophisticated kind of iron, such as iron bars. Nothing that is really essential to African culture or African survival or the African's economy, but it's something that they want. It's essentially a desire that they have to have European goods, which in some ways they consider superior to their own. Economically, this trade's not really benefiting Africa, but it's a trade that is controlled by the Africans. They're very careful to not allow Europeans into the interior, so they consider themselves their equal, and they're going to make sure that Europeans don't infiltrate their land. So here we can see on this triangular trade map, slaves are being traded from Africa towards the West Indies. They're also trading gold, ivory, spices, hardwoods. And in return from America, they're getting things like iron, gunpowder, clothes, tools. Now, when you're trading people and having them to migrate to another country, that's forced migration. The slaves didn't sign up for this. They're not like the settlers that we discussed in the colonies and the explorers from earlier, who chose and made the decision that they wanted to come to a new land and that they wanted to migrate. As a slave, you didn't have that choice. You were forced into migration. So there's a difference. There's voluntary migration and forced migration. You probably had something happen in your life where you've heard someone say, Hey, who wants to volunteer to help with this? Nobody's forcing you to do so. You're just volunteering and deciding on your own that you want to help. Well, that's what it was like for the settlers and early European explorers. They volunteered to come to America and to migrate. But again, the slaves did not volunteer. They were forced to do so. Log into Studies Weekly through Clever, read the Week 4 articles, Slavery in the New World, the Amistad, and Slavery in the Colonies. Complete your exit ticket as assigned by your teacher. Use the information that you learned in this lesson from the slides and Studies Weekly to answer the question. Good luck, and we'll talk again soon.